motor tone that gave the world a great singer, Steve Wonder. On reaching Detroit, I recall some of the words of a song sung by Marvin Gaye, another famous Motown product. The words go, quote, brother, there's far too many of you dying. There's far too many of you crying.
Ladies and gentlemen, my special guest is the one and only Mr. James Chapman. It's a miracle that we're able to talk to James Chapman tonight because he almost was not here. He almost became a statistic. Instead, he's decided to put these statistics in one corner and put some possible alternative solutions in another corner, and to challenge you to use your mind to go back and forth to decide whether or not you wish to remain a part of the problem or a part of the solution. Let's talk about the early life of James Chapman. What was it like?
Well, Mojo, it was a tough one. You know, I grew up in the South. You know, I was a child of the 60s. I watched the disappointments as they murdered Malcolm and murdered Martin. I watched people believe that white people in Washington could give us freedom or give us civil rights, and I put all my hope and all my faith and all my trust in that. And when I became a man and was on my own, I realized that nobody could give me anything, but I did not have the power, I thought, to take what is rightfully mine. Freedom, responsibility, self-awareness, and acceptance are not things people give you. They're things that you have, but the only way you can have them is to take them. You don't take them from individuals, you take them from this universe where they are freely there waiting for you when you realize that they're yours for the taking. You know, I went through a lot of stuff. I lived in the streets for almost 2.5 years, believing that there was nothing worth living for. I sit there on the verge of committing suicide, writing my mother a suicide note, trying to explain to her why I didn't want to live, when I realized in the process of writing that note, it's not that I don't want to live, it's just that I did not know how. Because my daddy, and I love him dearly, believed that you could march on Washington and get what you needed to live. They believed that by desegregating schools and housing, you can get what you needed to live. But I realize now what I need as a young black man, nobody has but me. Now, you can't disrespect me, you can't call me out my name, you can't deny me things that are mine, but when they are mine, I don't have to sit back and wait for you to give them to me. I take them, then I use them in a positive, empowering way, and I grow, man.
Okay, let's talk about the word take. Let's talk about, you mentioned respect, you mentioned what's rightfully yours.
There you go.
Okay, when you say take, what are you talking about?
You know, it's like there's certain things called dignity, integrity, self-respect, self-esteem that are tied into where we live, how we live, why we live, and who we live for and with. And when we realize that, we realize that there's certain things that we have a responsibility to take. I had to take my dignity when I was living in the streets of Houston, Texas. The only McDonald's I got was the McDonald's they threw out in the garbage behind the McDonald's. And I had to realize as I was sitting there contemplating my death that I don't want this. But nobody's going to give me a job because they look at me and I don't smell the right way, I don't look the right way, so they already assume that I am not worth anything. So I had to go deep inside myself and then go outside of myself and say, what out here do I need? Yes, I needed money, I needed food, I needed clothing, I needed a place to stay, but first I needed dignity, I needed integrity, and I drew these mental lines around me and said nobody will cross them again. Nobody will have the power to hurt me again. And with that, I began to take my dignity and take my integrity. And I was a rich man when I was a homeless man on welfare. I was a powerful man when I didn't even have that proverbial pot that people talk about on the window to throw it out of. I was a blessed man because I realized that I had what it takes to live. And the miracle that has happened, that was 1984. And here it is, 1992. The miracle that has happened is astonishing. And people want to sit me inside and say, well, you were different. You did this, you did that, you did the other. No, I'm no different from anybody. The only thing I did was stay alive long enough for the change to come. That's all that made me different, and realize that the change had to come inside me. There's a lot of anger out there. I listened to the music of my young brothers and sisters. I saw the Rodney King stuff. I see the anger. I see the frustration. I drove down the streets of Detroit. I visited a shelter this afternoon. I watched my brothers and my sisters standing there frustrated, angry, canned like sardines, where people have them convinced that they can take away their freedom. I see the people frustrated, a young man telling me, well, you know, the governor took away my money and I lost my apartment because I couldn't get no welfare no more. And I saw his fear and his confusion. And I said to my brother, man, the governor shouldn't have had that power in the first place. You know, he should not have had the power to take away your dignity. Now, he might take away those pennies that wasn't enough in the first place, but he can't take away your dignity if you know where your dignity comes from. And your dignity comes from your birthright. When you are born a human being, you have certain rights to certain things. And what this play is all about, Mojo, is saying to people, if we as a community of African people will open our hearts with that love that is out of Africa, that love that connects all of us, that hope that says, if we believe in miracles, miracles will happen, we can rework this whole situation.
Okay, there's someone out there listening now that is homeless.
Yeah.
That is in a shelter right now. And when you say that dignity, you take that dignity. Let's take them from point A to point B. How do they take that dignity?
Well, I can only speak from my experience. Of course, I didn't kill myself. For me, I found out what it is I do. I write plays. And knowing that I had a reason to live. Everybody's not a playwright. You know, somebody might be a minister, somebody might be a teacher, somebody might be a bricklayer, or a hamburger flipper, or a trash man, or a parking lot attendant. Whatever it is that is what you do, do it. But then you got to spend some time with yourself. You know, there's nothing more essential than that. Sit down with yourself and ask two very important questions. Who am I and why am I here? And if you come up with answers to those questions, you have a reason to live, because all of us have a purpose for being here. And time is a constantly changing situation. By the nature of time, if you look at a clock, it's always moving. And if it doesn't have a second hand, you can't see that movement. But nonetheless, the movement is there. And if you look at it long enough, you will see that minute hand get from that 12 all the way back around to that 12. And it looks like it stood still, but it's always moving. As long as you know time is moving, you know your situation can change. And finally, you've got to expect it to change. I began expecting my homelessness to change a year before it did change. But I started making moves. I got up and I moved out of Texas, moved to a place where I thought it would be better for me to make that change happen, and I expected it to happen. I expected everything in my life to happen that has happened, because I sat down in 1983 and set goals as to where I wanted to be until I die, and I plan to die at the age of 100. And I have goals in my mind as to what I want to be at each juncture of my life, and for me, my junctures are every 5 years. And I sit down and I thought and I expect those things to happen. And it's amazing what happens to human beings when we expect things to happen. They happen. It ain't miracles. It's what it means to know who you are and why you are here.
So what you're saying is you have to find out number one, who you are.
You got to find out who you are.
You have to find out, number two, what you want to do.
Yes.
If you want to do anything at all.
Well, you got if you ask yourself who you are, that's a really deep question to see. Now, I'm a man. I'm an African-American man. You know, I'm a native of Detroit. I was born in Mississippi, Chicago, or Cleveland. No, I'm not talking about that. Who am I? You know, I am feelings, I am emotions, I am dreams, I am expectations, I am sadness, I am happiness, I am more complex than just a biological configuration of molecules. I am a whole person. And I guess I need to say to your listeners that each of us has a place on this planet that nobody else can occupy. And the thing that makes me so sad is so many of my brothers and sisters have died before their place was completely fulfilled. And people listening to me, if they really struggle with those questions, and yes, it is a struggle. It's a difficult struggle. It's a struggle that might take the rest of your life, but it's a struggle that is a positive struggle. And there's something wonderful about positive struggle. Positive struggle makes weak men strong. Positive struggle makes babies come to life and live and prosper. Positive struggle makes families survive intense situations. Positive struggle is what has caused the African American nation and America to rise out of the fire and flame of slavery to being the strong people we are now. And yes, we are strong. It's not just what you hear on television or read in the newspapers. We are strong people because we are resilient. They took us and stacked us up like boxes in the corner of a grocery store and called it housing projects, and we have survived that mess. They invented this drug crack and distributed in our community more readily than they do food stamps, and we are surviving that mess. Our babies are born smaller and smaller, but they are surviving. We are strong people, and when you know that and you really ask, who am I? Then you might come up with some answers.
And so I take it that you're saying that when you asked, who am I? If you find out that you're a teacher, then be the best.
You better teach. You may not have a degree to teach, but you can go down and teach the kids in the park. You can teach your children, teach your neighbors. If that's what you do, teach. You know, I don't have a degree in playwriting. In fact, I flunked all of my college classes in writing, all of my literature classes, because I have what they call a learning disability called dyslexia. You know, reading and interpreting words, sometimes writing them down, they come out all backwards and what have you. And I never mastered, European English, so it was a difficult process for me. But what I did was, I didn't let that stop me. Once I started knowing who I am and why I'm here, I started doing what I need to do and stop worrying about what people think of it. I just do it. And something amazing happens when you just do it. A sister called and she was in distress while we were on the break, Mojo, and she was saying, I know how you feel because I feel that way now. What do I do? Do something. When you're doing nothing, you're just waiting to die, but do something. And when you do it, whatever it is, you are taking advantage of that movement of time. And when you take advantage of the movement of time, you are expecting change. And when you expect change, change will come. The changes we made in the 1960s happened not because we marched, not because people in Washington got hearts. They came because we expected them to come. And the reason change has not come since Martin was murdered in 1968 is because on April 4th, 1968, we didn't expect anything to happen good. And since that time, if you look at history, ain't too much happened good because we don't expect it to. We expect our leaders to be failures. We expect our sons and our daughters to get caught up in the situations, and the expectations become real. When I talk to young people, I tell them, I expect you to be successful. And that says something to them that they haven't heard before. And I expect Detroit to continue to be the cultural mecca of modern Africa. Not only African Americans, but Africa throughout the world looks to this city for its culture, for its direction, for knowing who it is as a people, how it is to express itself. It ain't Minneapolis, it ain't Nashville, it ain't Los Angeles, it ain't Atlanta, it ain't New York. It's still Motown. Because in Motown, you got those homeboys from Mississippi and those homegirls from Georgia that's getting in there and talking about how they feeling. They may not do it as much through songs like they used to do, but it's happening. As I drive down the street, I see a certain rhythm happening here, a certain movement, and it's frightening because it says people are expecting change. And I hope that we're expecting that change to be positive, because change is going to happen, because that clock is still moving. No matter what you do, you might not wind the clock, but it doesn't stop time. And change is going to come. Go ahead, Mojo.
So if you're a dishwasher, be the best.
If you're a dishwasher, be the best and expect to own that restaurant. If you expect to own it, one day you might.
If you're a shoe shine boy,
If you're a shoe shine boy, be the best one, but expect to own the store where the shoes are purchased. In fact, own the company where the shoes are made. It might be over in Taiwan, but the profits are always made in America, and you can be the one making the profits if you expect that.
if you're a waiter or a waitress,
If you're a waiter or a waitress, own the restaurant and be the best one while you expect to own it. And you may not have to buy the one you're waiting in because it might not be that good, so build your own. Expect to be a builder. Expect to be great, and you will be great.
if you're a lawyer or a doctor,
If you're a lawyer or a doctor, be a diligent one and expect to be a good one, and you will be a good one.
if you're a singer,
If you're a singer, sing from your heart. Expect to move people when you open your mouth, whether you singing what they used to call the honky-tonk blues, whether you singing gospel, whether you rapping, whether you bebopping or hip-hopping, whatever you do, expect to be great. Expect to be the biggest thing since Stevie Wonder.
if you're a bus driver or a dancer,
If you're a bus driver or a dancer, be the best one and expect to do great. If you're a bus driver, expect to be the president of your union. I heard that's where all the money is in Detroit. And if you're a dancer, expect to be a Debbie Allen. No, expect to be greater than Debbie Allen. She won't mind because she expected to be great, and she is.
if you're a laid off auto worker,
If you're a laid off auto worker, expect a miracle. I was talking to a brother today living in a shelter. He used to work for the biggest automaker from this area, I guess, was Ford way back when. And he was telling me how he finally accepted that he won't be going back to work. So I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to school. And I said, I want you to expect a miracle. Expect to do better monetarily, socially, spiritually, emotionally than you ever did before. And if you expect that, it will happen. And see, we forget a lot. We forget that our mothers and fathers not too far removed took bus trips from way down south, whether it was in Florida or Georgia, Alabama, or Mississippi, or Louisiana, all the way up to Detroit when they was working on those sharecrop farms where every October they would go to this man and he would tell them, you ain't got no money. You've worked a whole year for nothing. And we forgot about that. And they expected a miracle in Detroit. They came to Detroit and it was a miracle for them. If we expect that miracle again, it can happen again for us. Maybe we need to take that bus trip back down south. I don't know. But we have to expect a miracle, and we have to be as bold and courageous as our grandmas and grandpas were, and take it, let that dream take us wherever we need to go. When I got on the bus January 30th, 1983, headed to Columbus, Ohio, I hadn't heard much about it. But I knew for me, I needed to get out of where I was. And I went there, and I expected change to happen, and change did happen. It happened in me, not because of where I was, but because of who I am.
92.3 FM, Electrifying Mojo. My special guest tonight is James Chapman. He's the writer of a new play that's coming to town. It's called Our Young Black Men Are Done and No One Seems to Care. And that starts at the Music Hall.
Next Tuesday night.
Next Tuesday night?
Yeah,
opening
and we'll
night.
be here through Sunday, and tickets are going fast. You know how to get them here in Detroit, Ticketmaster and the Music Hall. I'm not the best promoter for my plays, Mojo, because I don't do it to get people to come out and see the plays. I do it because that's how I stay alive. That's my lifeline. I have to give what's been given to me.
What would you say to those young brothers on the corner with those signs, hungry, will work for food?
I would say to those young brothers on the corner with those sons hungry that, feed yourself mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. Sit down and ask yourself those two questions: who am I and why am I here? Then sit down with your son and encourage him to ask those questions, and look him dead in his eyes and say, I love you. I don't know how we are going to make it, but together we are going to make it. I can't give you everything for Christmas. I can't give you everything for your birthday. I can't give you money every time I see you, but what I can give you is a listening ear, the best advice I know, and the love that comes only from a father to a son that will be always. And I can give you my expectation to live to be an old black man, and my expectation for you to do likewise. And you don't know how far that goes with your son. I didn't want my father to give me a lot of presents. I just wanted time for my father. I wanted him to share his childhood with me, the good, the bad, the ugly. I wanted to know who he is. And now that he will be 70 next year, I'm glad that I've had that chance to know him. But he lived to be an old black man. Fathers, how many of you will live to see your sons get grown? That's a serious question, because too many babies have daddies in cemeteries. I was talking to a young man today who just met a girl who was 8.5 months pregnant, and she was sitting at his place of work crying because her baby's father just got shot in the head, and she was wondering what is she going to say to her baby about his daddy. That's a serious question. What is she going to say? Brothers, how many of us will live to see our sons get grown? I don't care how you got them. I don't care where they came from. I don't care if their mama's at home by these. I ain't into all of that. I'm not into trying to turn the African-American family into the European-American family. What I am into is teaching our children. When I grew up, it didn't have to be my mama, my daddy. It was my neighbor. It was my friends' mamas and daddies. It was whoever was there that loved me and said, this is the wrong direction. This is the right direction. Let me help you go in the right direction. That's what we have to have, Detroit. Detroit is like this ghost town, except the ghosts didn't leave. They're walking around town. I saw about 6 people walking with crutches with one leg today, and I said, where am I? What happened to all those other legs? They got shot off in drug fights. They got shot off in gang fights. They got shot off because somebody was sleeping with somebody that had nobody sleeping with. They got shot off because somebody got mad at somebody about their sneakers or about their woman or about their man. I'm tired of that. What I'm talking about is reaching out and saying, no, man, I don't want to fight you. I want to be your brother, not in blood, but in history. I want to be your friend. I want to sit down and talk about how we can move beyond this dumb stuff to where we can move to something that's real. How can we rebuild this community? How can we reclaim some of these empty buildings and take our children out of the hands of these demons and teach them ourselves? How can we do that? How can we tell our children who they are and why they are here? That's what I want to talk to you about. No, I don't want to sell you no crack, and I'm not going to buy no crack from you, but I'm not going to criticize you for doing it, because I know that's all you know how to do. But what I'm going to say to you is I love you. No, it don't sound right. It don't sound macho. It don't sound masculine, but it sounds African, because in Africa, we talk about love. Men can hug each other, not worry about what people think about it. They can hold each other's hand because it shows that they are connected. And when you are connected, you are concerned about another person's well-being. I can very well hold your hand and shoot you in the face. And I'm not talking about slapping 5. I'm talking about staying alive.
The number one cause of death in the African American community for young males between 13 and 34, the number one cause of death, homicide.
And the number one committers of that homicide are black people. You know, we talk about Rodney King, but if all we had to worry about was white folks, most of us would be alive. You know, what we didn't talk about is when we was rioting in Los Angeles, 30 of us died at the hands of 30 of us. Those people that died were not white people. Why is that? Because we don't know who we are or why we are here. In Bangkok, Thailand, people said we ain't gonna take it no more, and hundreds of thousands of them came out in the streets, not to kill each other, but to say you got to make a change. Their prime minister resigned, the government's all shook up, and they talking about what they gonna do to change. The last time hundreds of thousands of us walked out in the streets and said you got to make a change, they passed a civil rights amendment, they integrated our schools, they gave us food stamps, they gave us jobs, they gave us housing, they did all these things. I challenge us to come out in the streets, not to fight each other, but to say I'm not gonna take this anymore. In the first place we can come out in the streets is next week to the music hall. Come on out there to say I'm not going to take it no more. Come on out there to get some power, some hope, and say I'm going to take this back to my neighborhood and we're going to do something. I look forward to a day in America when we can really march again. We have turned the march into a holiday event on January 15th and call it movement. That ain't no movement. I refuse to march for any reason except change. And you don't have to wait till Martin Luther King's birthday to march. If he was here today, he would tell you to take that holiday and throw it somewhere and demand justice again. He would tell you to take that holiday and throw it somewhere and demand equality again. Not equality in housing or in jobs, but equality in spirit. What we have a problem with in America is we are not equal in spirit. The American dream is not our dream. It is our nightmare. Something's got to happen, and it's got to happen with us. It's got to happen with us asking those two questions. Who am I and why am I here? And when we ask those questions and we struggle with the answers to those questions, we will rise up like a city of anointed people for all the world to see. And they will look at us like they look at Nelson Mandela. They will look at us like they look at those students in China, those people in Russia or Czechoslovakia or in Germany. They will look at us and they will say, what is happening over there? Justice is rising again. Hope is rising again. Peace peace will prevail because we don't have to kill nobody to get what we want. All we have to do is say it is ours and we are ready for it, so we are going to take it. And when we all take it simultaneously, it will move to us just like a baby moves to its mama, because can't nobody keep a baby from its mama, because that baby knows who its mama is. And peace is our baby. Justice is our baby. Equality is our baby. Self-righteousness and dignity is our baby. We just have to open our arms collectively and say, come on home, baby. Come on home. And then all those things like the crack and the AIDS and the crime and the homicide and the suicide, yes, there is suicide in our communities, they will leave because our arms will be full and we will have no more room for that garbage. We'll have no more room for empty houses.
One night, you had decided that you were going to commit suicide.
I was going to do it.
But you thought about your mother, and you knew that she would want some answers.
Her arms were open. My mother loved me. My mother said something to me when I was 18 years old. She said, I don't know what else to do. And she looked at me crying. She was so scared. She said, I don't know what else to do. I was so frustrated, and she saw my frustration and my anger, and she saw me leaving, and she thought I would never come back again. And for years, I did not go back home. And I always remembered her saying, I don't know what to do. And as I contemplated taking my life, I said, and I knew I had to explain to Mama that it was not her fault. Because mothers who have lost your sons, it's not your fault. You loved him, you did the best you could do, and that is a horrible loss. But if we win this war, and we will, his life will not be lost in vain. He will be a fallen soldier in a battle that we still don't realize we're fighting. But I had to say to Mama, I love you, it's not your fault, and I'm sorry. This is why I did it. And by writing down why I did it, I began to ask that question, who am I, before I realized the importance of the question. And I kept writing until I went from that question to the question, why am I here? Before I realized the importance of the question. And I am still struggling with those questions. And no, it's not easy. I still get depressed. I still get frustrated. I still get frightened. I still cry sometimes. When I saw them beating up Rodney King, I cried. When I saw them find those cops innocent, I cried. When I saw the story of young black men right here in Detroit killing each other left and right, I cried. There's nothing wrong with crying. There's something wrong with dying. And when we cry, we're struggling with those questions. Why?
What about
Why?
what about the ones that are riding around right now listening to the radio? I mean, what about some of those same people who I don't know who coined this term, at risk, but you know that's been a reality for a long time. But what about those people who are riding around right now on their way
to the crack house?
On their way to commit another atrocity?
There are people listening to this show, Mojo, whether we like it or not, that just hit that crack pipe. People going to the house right now to get some. People that have hurt people that have taken people's lives, people that have done some horrible things.
What do you want to say to them?
I want to say there's tomorrow. That clock is still ticking. It's never too late to change. Change has to come within you. I'm not here as a preacher of what's right or wrong, but what I'm saying, if you ask yourself those questions, you will find that crack has a bitter taste. If you ask yourself those questions, you will find that you don't need to lash out to your brother or your sister in frustration and anger. If you ask yourself those questions, you don't have to steal from anybody. I would also like to say that, remember, when you watch that clock, you have to be patient. Because it doesn't take a minute to make an hour. It takes 60 minutes. And 60 minutes seems to be a long time, especially when you know 24 sets of 60 minutes makes a day. And 30 sets of days makes a month. And 12 sets of months makes a year. It takes a long time for change to happen. But if you expect it to happen, it will happen.
We have a job to do in this community. Black people, white people. We have a job to bring this community back to life. What would you say to the collective brotherhood of man about going about exercising that responsibility to return Metro Detroit to the music mecca, to the spiritual mecca, to the mecca of the soul that purifies human thoughts?
When I grew up in the South, we looked to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X for the sermon. We always looked to Detroit for the choir. You know, the music of the movement of the 60s came out of this town. It was Marvin Gaye, it was Aretha Franklin, it was Stevie Wonder, it was the Supremes, it was the Temptations, it was music, you know, music that rose out of the projects, out of the ghetto, out of the pain of what it means to be African and American. I want us to start singing again, Detroit. You know, when we look to the gospel music, we look to Detroit. It was here that the choirs was, you know, and I remember, you know, the first time I came to Detroit, I just expected to see it on the street corners, to see it in the bus station, in the airport.
92.3 FM, Electrifying Mojo. My special guest tonight is James Chapman. He's the writer of a new play. It's called Our Young Black Men Are Dying and No One Seems to Care.
It is Motown that gave the world a great singer, Steve Wonder. On reaching Detroit, I recall some of the words of a song sung by Marvin Gaye, another famous Motown product. The words go, quote, brother, there's far too many of you dying.